Here we're going to talk about financial management, the different sectors, and compare the industries among the profit, nonprofit, and so forth. It's important to remember that financial management approaches vary greatly, and they're influenced by factors such as mandate and goals of the organization and the political environments in which they are situated. We're going to look at three different types of organizations overall: public organizations, nonprofit organizations, and commercial or for-profit enterprises. The public sector, when it comes to our services, have a broad mandate to serve the entire community in most cases. They're usually a department or an extension of the government. They're public in nature as far as their organization emphasis. They have to be non-discriminatory in their offerings and delivery of services, and they have to be non-discriminatory in which way they operate and use their funds and how they appropriate and expropriate their funds. Let's take a look at the legislative and legal parameters for some public sector organizations. In some cases, they have the legal authority to levy and gather taxes to help with their operating. Some may be federal and/or state and local government authorized, meaning they are mandated to do certain things. Some are grounded in the U.S. Constitution and state constitutions through enabling legislation, meaning that's how they were formed. Overall, they have social roles and expectations. Their purpose is to meet some social need or needs, and their expectation for public funds is to be used for common good and community betterment. There's general acceptance and tolerance for low cost and free services, such as programs, parks, trails, and so forth. The market management technique used in the public sector is often market segmentation and target marketing. Those are things I would encourage you to look up and explore on your own. Considerations for this include pricing of services and programs. So make sure that you're looking at, we're not pricing so much for profit. The other consideration is distribution to a broad market base, making sure that we reach a wide variety of people in the community. So how do public sector organizations know that they have succeeded? So we can look at goal attainment. This is a couple of things. Is the public good served? Is their participant reception and response positive? And are we fiscally responsible, and have we achieved our financial goals? Some financial management opportunities to consider related to the public sector include tax exemption, so they're not going to pay certain taxes. Ability to borrow funds for a capital project, so for large projects they can go into different borrowing mechanisms. There's goodwill and altruistic behavior of people in the community, so we're looking at volunteer programs as an example of this. But overall, people have goodwill and they try to do good things for their community. Then we can look at different challenges related to financial management in the public sector. These include scrutiny of and accountability to the public. So this can be to individuals in the community all the way up to legislative or regulatory bodies. We must ensure that public funds are properly managed. So this is a pretty intense scrutiny regarding that as well. And then another big one is political challenges. We have to be sensitive to the political environment and the changing of the political weather, so to speak. The public sector, in some cases, also has the opportunity to levy taxes. This could be collection of taxes specifically for a recreation district, or getting taxes that are collected through local municipal government or state government, or getting federal money as well. Overall, they can get tax dollars to do their work and complete their mission and so forth. Okay, so let's look at organizational structure for leisure services of different types. So the most common structure is a combined parks and recreation department. This is where we're looking at programs and facilities and areas in one department. Sports organizations are not typically part of the public organization within this. Now this has changed depending on where you're at and as things evolved, but overall the sports organizations are often nonprofits linked to government, and they range from very informal to a very formal environment, whether this be a little league or adult sports leagues, depending on where you're at and what you're doing. When we think about tourism and commercial recreation enterprises, oftentimes they do include some public organizations. There's a city or a state tourism development office, for example, and sometimes they'll even have local destination marketing organizations. So again, these can vary a lot from place to place throughout the United States. Let's look at operational and fiscal authority. So typically, these leisure service organizations report to a policy or advisory board. There are mandates and expectations for services present in the enabling legislation. So whatever created that department, there are some expectations to go along with that legislation or wording. Oftentimes this is clarified in a strategic plan or an ongoing long-range planning document. So if we have a 5 or a 10-year planning document or a strategic plan, they can clarify a little bit more about what those expectations are for the organization. And then we have to look at fiscal responsibility to state and federal laws and to local expectations. Oftentimes there's some specific financial objectives within the leisure service organization, such as the purpose to improve quality of life of residents. That's a good one. There's revenue expectations prescribed in parent organizations. So what kind of revenue should we be bringing in? So think about this as far as pricing too. So we have pricing based on operational philosophy. Pricing and revenue are linked. Sometimes we price to do cost recovery. Sometimes we do pricing to make profit and so forth. And then we can look at capital improvement as a broad-based decision. And oftentimes we're looking into capital development monies with that. So debt management here is a little bit more specific and distinct versus other types of organizations. So let's remember that the two goals of the public organization is to serve the public and maintain a sound financial foundation. So overall, a lot of times this means not going in debt. So deficit spending is typically not allowed, period. It's not like at home where you can put stuff on your credit card and go in debt to achieve a goal. This is just not allowed, period. So typically, we're looking at 3 different ways to gain revenue. So we're looking at tax revenues, which we've mentioned a few times by now, where we collect taxes in some way. Fees and charges for programs or services. Whatever our pricing mechanism is, where it can bring in some monies for our services or facilities. And then we can look at enterprise operations, where this is where we're looking at not so much cost recovery or anything like that, but basically making money to offset expenses elsewhere. I know we just mentioned we cannot go in debt or operate in deficit. However, let's be a little bit more specific here. We can have long-term debt for capital projects, for example. So examples might include recreation centers, aquatic centers, sports parks, those big projects that take a lot of money. Local governments can go into debt for that through bonds and whatnot. Again, we won't go into that specifically right now, but there are restrictions on what type of debt we can take on through the city or municipal government and what those debts can be used for. And often that's controlled very specifically by state and local legislation. So often our accounting, as far as financial accounting, is dictated by the municipal or state government in which we are involved. So it's very similar to the private sector as far as the way we go about accounting. The difference, I think, here is the use of revenue is very restricted based on the source of the revenue. So oftentimes we receive a budget from a tax base or whatnot, so we have a certain budget. All revenues that we gain throughout that year, or overall, depending on the base of that source of income, go back into a general fund that we do not have the ability to spend out of that fund specifically. So overall, there's just different ways to look at it. Pricing is another thing we have to look at very carefully. So frequently, we're looking at pricing as a tool to do partial and full cost recovery, not so much profit. Usually with leisure service public organizations, we have to do some kind of reporting as well. So this will often include financial reporting, sometimes mixed with other types of reporting. So monthly reporting is the most common. Sometimes we do quarterly. And we have to remember that seasonal things happen as far as budget considerations are concerned. So in the summer, when things are more active for our types of organizations, we can see our expenditures and revenue vary greatly when we compare it to things like January, February, when we're not as active. Generally, there's a chief financial officer that educates the board, politicians, and employees on the budget in general, the spending patterns, the debt patterns, and stuff like that. Then we have to look at performance evaluation related to our fiscal services. So we have to remember there are expectations for accounting and performance. So we can look at this as performance goals and objectives. Are we meeting what we said we would want to meet? Attendance reports. So are people coming to or visiting or enjoying our services and facilities? And then we can look at other outcome measurements that are very specific. So if we develop an outcome that we want to achieve, and then we measure that. We can also look at performance evaluation. So this is effectiveness and efficiency measures that are becoming more common in this space, this professional space. So measurement is becoming more sophisticated as well. So it's more important ever to look at and see how organizations provide effective evaluations of their operations. So this includes financial management, and then their programs, services, and facilities. This concludes our Leisure Service Financial Management Part 1.